Hello and welcome to the Siebel 22 workshop course overview. My name is Alexander Hansal and I'm happy that you can join me for this presentation and for this class. So in this presentation we take a look at the course goals, the continuous release model and the modules you can expect in the Siebel 22 workshop. So the goal of the Siebel 22 workshop, as with any Siebel workshops that we provide on the Siebel Hub, is to provide a comprehensive big picture for Siebel professionals who need to understand the dominant architectural and functional changes that were or are introduced with IP17, including Siebel 18, 19, 20, 21, and the most current Siebel CRM updates. So the materials across the modules reflect innovations and features introduced by Oracle actually since IP 15.5. And the course material at the time of this recording is based on Siebel 22.1. So here we have an overview over the categories in the Siebel workshop. There are three main categories: architecture and administration, development, test and deployment, and application integration. And each category is packed with wonderful modules. In the architecture and administration category, we have the architecture proper, installation, and Siebel management console. We are covering the modular deployment engine. There is a chapter that covers all angles of installing Siebel CRM on Windows and Linux, so A to Z. And there are additional chapters on diagnostics and performance topics, Zookeeper and gateway cluster, upgrade overview, containerization, and cloud. For developers keen on getting their own upgrade fix on the latest Siebel 22 versions, we have chapters on Workspaces, Web Tools, Migration Application, List of Values Management, Test Automation, Usage Pattern Tracking, Mobile Applications, and even an introduction to OpenUI. On the application integration side, the most prominent feature in that respect is the REST API, which we discover in depth in a separate module. We have EAI notes, we have updates on Java integration technologies such as Java Data Bean, Java Business Service, Java Message Services. We cover the latest innovations in application integration such as the CSV data export feature, desktop integration Siebel Agent, Siebel Outlook drag and drop, CalDAV, CarDAV, and portlets. For more information about each of these modules and the entire workshop, go to siebelhub.com. Now, why the importance of the monthly updates and an always up-to-date curriculum which only the Siebel Hub can provide? Oracle has shifted for its Application Unlimited, that includes the likes of PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, but also Siebel CRM. It has shifted from an innovation pack or yearly or near yearly deployment model of new versions that have a definite endpoint, like Siebel IP14, IP15, or IP16. You got 1.5 years of patches and updates, and then that was it. You had to or have to upgrade to the latest version to get the latest patches and bug fixes. With IP17 that changed. IP17 was the last innovation pack that you could actually upgrade to, and then on top of IP17, Oracle conceived the continuous innovation model starting with 18.5. So if you are already upgraded to anything higher than IP17, you are on the continuous innovation track. So you can simply apply an update such as 22.1 or future updates and get the latest list of bug fixes and features. Now let's discuss exemplary content of the modules in the Siebel 22 workshop. We start with a slide from the Siebel upgrade overview, which describes the upgrade paths and compares them to the update path. So it's important to distinguish the terminology here, as upgrade refers to upgrading a prior to IP17 version, so anything below or equal to IP16, and depending on the age of your Siebel implementation, the amount of customizations that you made, an upgrade is always measured in person months or even person years. So it's a lengthy project, but it brings you always to the latest, in this case 22.x release. If you upgraded over the past years and you may be on Siebel 20 and you want to update to 22, this is not a lengthy process as is the upgrade. It's measured in person days, as you simply apply updates to the installed Siebel software that you have and run what's known as the post-install database setup, and then you are on the latest Siebel release. So especially the upgrade paths and the upgrade process is discussed in great detail in the Siebel upgrade overview chapter. Other chapters, such as the architecture chapter, covers the changes introduced between the old world of Siebel, such as IP16 and below, and the new world of Siebel introduced with IP17. So one of the aspects we discuss in great detail in the architecture chapters are the key architectural changes that you encounter when you cross the IP17 boundary. So, for example, the third-party web server and Siebel Web Server extension that we know from prior releases are replaced by a combination of the open source Apache Tomcat server and what is known as the application interface, a Java application written by Oracle that replaces the Siebel Web Server extension. The Java-based configuration wizards that we know from older releases are replaced by a web-based and REST-based Siebel management console. The enterprise configuration store known as siebenes.dat and the eapps.cfg file, the configuration for the web server extension, are replaced by a registry, as Oracle calls it, which is an Apache Zookeeper implementation. So lots of changes there. All the communication, if it's HTTP, it's actually HTTPS, so it's fully secured by transport layer security, and that requires, for example, valid certificates placed in correct format in key stores and trust stores at installation time. A big change there for many administrators. And one more tidbit here is the load balancing, which in IP17 and higher is always enabled. It's simply part of the AI functionality, doesn't have to be enabled separately. Other things that you will explore in the architecture chapters is understanding of the comparison and differences between the old and the new world of the Siebel CRM architecture, as you can see by this example diagram from the architecture presentation. So in IP16 and earlier, we have, for example, the aforementioned web server extension accompanying a third-party web server, forming the web tier of Siebel along with its configuration file, eapps.cfg, and we have the familiar site of one or more Siebel servers, forming an enterprise which is managed by a gateway name server, which keeps all the enterprise configuration in a proprietary file we know as siebenes.dat. So this is the architecture you encounter in IP16 and earlier. And if you look to the right of the diagram, the architecture in IP17 and later is similar but very different. in that the application container implemented by Apache Tomcat plays a very important role. And you see that there are two types of containers, one for the web tier and one accompanying each gateway or Siebel server. And the Apache Zookeeper now replaces the enterprise configuration store, formerly known as siebenes.dat. So all this and more we will explore in great detail in the architecture chapter. Another aspect of architecture and configuration of a new or existing Siebel enterprise is the new Siebel Management Console, which has been introduced with IP17. It's a web-based client which administrators can use for setup and configuration after installation, the so-called bootstrap process. They can manage profiles, deploy, for example, Siebel servers and gateway clusters, and also use this console for server configuration and server management tasks, prior confined to either the server manager command line, which is still available, by the way, and the views in the respective screens of the Siebel application, which are also still available. So server configuration management is an additional option here. The SMC also exposes a REST API, which is at the time of this recording not documented completely, but you will learn a lot about modern Siebel management in the architecture and configuration chapter. And also there is no small amount of information about Zookeeper and the gateway cluster feature, which administrators will be very interested in, and we have a separate chapter covering all the angles of what exactly is Apache Zookeeper, how does it fit into the new architecture, and how can we establish a gateway cluster to eliminate the single point of failure that is introduced with the new architecture, since if you have only one store for the enterprise configuration, if that store is not available, the enterprise is basically down. So a cluster can, of course, mitigate that problem. We also cover a lot of aspect on installation and of new installs and also update installs in the architecture chapter. As an example here, we have the discussion of the Seamless Repository Delivery Framework, which is introduced in 20.3 and takes care of not only updating the binaries, but also delivering repository and seed data into your database or your file system, your folders, as Oracle has started delivering repository content as files. They call non-extensible object files, or NEO. And these files, together with the database stored runtime repository, are used at runtime by the object managers. So we will learn about the update installer and the post-install database setup utility, which is mandatory for updates and generates a nice report so you can check if everything went okay. And you will also learn about the optional repository upgrade that you can run if, as a customer, you want to update non-mandatory repository changes introduced by Oracle over the months and years of enhancements. The Siebel Modular Deployment Engine, or MDE, has been introduced in 21.2, and we honor it with a separate chapter. If you want to learn everything about this new way of installing Siebel components, including all the components that you can possibly run for Siebel, down from Siebel Server, Gateway, AI, Tools, Mobile or Developer Web Client, along with the repositories needed for new installations and upgrades, or the database engine for the mobile web client. It's all now packaged in a single installer. So if you have been working with prior versions of Siebel 17 or higher, you know that there was a base installation of 17.0, which is now redundant with the new modular deployment engine which supports any path of installation, such as new, the so-called migration installation, and update installations. An important aspect of the immediate present architecture of Siebel CRM and the immediate future architecture of possible Siebel CRM deployments. These discussions often circle around the terminology of containers and cloud, and we have dedicated a whole module in the Siebel 22 workshop on this topic. So in a nutshell, Siebel CRM can be deployed on cloud environments of your choice as we speak, either containerized using Docker or Kubernetes, or bare software installations like more traditional approaches. Oracle provides Docker images for every Siebel monthly release which customers can use. Oracle also provides the Cloud Lift service by Advanced Consulting and a reference architecture to make it easier for customers to migrate on-premises Siebel CRM deployments to the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And speaking of the immediate future, at the time of this recording, the Siebel Cloud Manager and the so-called Component Services Architecture, formerly announced as Cloud Native Architecture for Siebel, are planned for release or beta release in the first quarter, first half of 2022. So the always up-to-date promise of the Siebel Hub will have you covered once these features are available. For now, make sure you watch the containerization and cloud module if you're interested in how to deploy Siebel CRM on cloud environments. The other architecture and administrative modules that we have mentioned in the overview is the installation A to Z, which is a set of comprehensive real-life videos showing real installations on the Siebel Hub YouTube channel. So this part of the workshop is actually free. Another topic that we have in the architecture category is diagnostics and performance, a module which allows you to learn everything an administrator would like to know about traditional and new ways of diagnosing problems and performance measurements or performance problems, such as increasing the logging for the Tomcat servers, figuring out what goes on the AI, on the cloud gateway, on the Siebel server, and general tips and tricks for performance monitoring and improvements. Now let's look at chapters in the Siebel 22 workshop for developers. So here we have, of course, Siebel Web Tools, introduced in IP17, so going strong in its 5th year at the time of this recording. It's a Siebel Web Applications implemented in OpenUI that emulates Siebel tools. So it gives developers read and write access to the repository object definitions, the so-called design repository, with enhanced functionality such as the first web template editor that is included in a tool, the applet or view editor, and those two are actually only available in Web Tools. And Web Tools has, over the past years, gotten a lot of features and enhancements, such as the script editor and debugger and the workflow editor and simulator. It coexists with Siebel Tools, so Siebel Tools is still, at the time of this recording, required for some tasks such as schema changes, applying schema changes, running wizards other than the web service wizard. Oracle has announced very often plans to reach 100% parity with Siebel Tools. So Web Tools is bound to replace Siebel Tools, but not anytime soon as it seems, so both are valid developer tools. The other feature that is most intriguing to administrators and developers alike. That was introduced actually in IP16, but not mandatory in that release. In IP17, it is mandatory, is Workspaces. So Workspaces establish a sandbox concepts, which makes it easy for developers to edit and test configuration changes in a safe environment without impacting other developers, and only publish these changes, which Siebel calls deliver, when they are ready. Most of these changes can be migrated into test or production environments without significant downtime even. And this Workspaces concept is in full support for modern CI/CD pipelines, including options for versioning, rebasing, merging, difference analysis, and of course, delivery. Workspaces replace the local database, and as we have mentioned, they are mandatory in IP17. So if you want to learn all about Workspaces and how to use them for parallel development, check out the Workspaces module. Another area of a lot of enhancements in IP17 is Siebel Test Automation. So a feature that exists in Siebel for a long time is now enhanced with built-in automation framework for recording and playback that does not require any coding, and so is ideal for creating unit tests and combining them into batches of tests. The new test execution framework is available to run these batch tests in a lights-out fashion, if you will, using a plugin for the open source Jenkins automation server. Along with end-to-end management and other features, Siebel Test Automation, as we have it in Siebel 22, can help teams test faster and build on the existing Siebel test knowledge they might already have. So if you're interested in test automation, what has happened to test automation, we have you covered with an entire module in the Siebel 22 workshop. We have previously mentioned the need to migrate changes from development to test or production environments, changes that can be situated in the repository, but also outside of the repository, like list of values, or even outside the database, like file artifacts, scripts, or style sheets. And Oracle has introduced a whole new application called the migration application to accomplish this complex task. The migration application uses the Siebel inbound REST API to invoke the migration business services that do the grunt work, and it provides a REST API so you can leverage it headless without using the user interface and automating pipelines, for example. The migration application, as you will learn in great detail in the migration chapter, supports full and incremental scenarios. It provides history and logging information, and it supports synchronous, end-to-end, or asynchronous migration scenarios. Another area of constant change and enhancements is mobility. So in 2020, actually with the 20.9 release, Oracle has published the smartphone UX, and that is one of the topics we discuss in the mobile applications chapter. So smartphone UX allows for automatic optimization of views and applets for phone-sized screens. So it uses the tile visualization feature by default, comes with a customizable context renderer class for JavaScript, improves the controls that users see on the screen. It uses the Oracle Redwood theme, a first for Siebel applications. Other applications at the time of this recording do not use this theme, and is available for all Siebel mobile applications. So if Siebel Mobility is one of your topics in your project, make sure you check out the mobile applications chapter. For developers, there are more chapters that you can use, such as information about the intricacies of list of values management, which is now workspace managed seed data, and how it behaves at design time, migration, and runtime. Another great chapter to understand Siebel better is usage pattern tracking, which allows us to record, store, and analyze the clicks and the events that users trigger on the system. And if you are new to Siebel OpenUI, you can kickstart your Siebel OpenUI developer career with an OpenUI introduction module. Mind you that the Siebel Hub also offers a complete Siebel OpenUI curriculum, so go to siebelhub.com to check that out. In the integration arena, the most prominent feature is the REST API. Actually introduced in IP16 for the first time, it has been greatly enhanced and even more integrated into the daily life of Siebel administrators, so to speak, and developers in IP17 and higher. So in the REST API module, you will learn everything you want to know about the inbound REST API for business object data, workspace data, business service invocation. The migration application uses REST API, test automation uses REST API, and there's a REST API for product administration and industry specific, such as clinical or telco REST APIs. Quite a lot there. Also, you will learn about the outbound REST framework, which allows you to import an open API description or Swagger file, very similar to what you might know from SOAP and WSDL files, and the JSON to property set conversion that happens implicitly or explicitly. The desktop integration Siebel agent is another example of enhanced applications that have existed in prior Siebel versions but have been greatly enhanced with IP17 and higher. We have a chapter available for you if you want to learn all about DISA. The chapter also discusses the Siebel Outlook drag and drop, or SOD, which is not related to DISA, by the way. So the focus is really on DISA and its capabilities and its customization options in terms of custom Java and client-side JavaScript that you can write to implement integration scenarios on the Windows desktops. Several other modules augment the learning experience for Siebel integration practitioners. So one module is about all notable changes for integration touchpoints that occurred in IP17 and later, for example, for SOAP interfaces. So that's the EAI notes chapter. There's a whole chapter on all the Java integration techniques that might or might not have been updated so much, but they are always touched by the new architecture, such as Java Data Bean, Java Business Services, or Java Message Service, JMS integration. The Siebel learning experience of the Siebel Hub is always up to date, so you can even have your own learning module about the relatively new CSV data export feature introduced in 21.10 to support the Oracle Unity integration, or for general full or incremental CSV-based integration with on-premises and cloud systems. Another integration module that has caught the attention of anyone who upgrades to Siebel IP16 or later is the CalDAV and CarDAV capability of Siebel for calendar and contact synchronization. And we have a chapter on portlets, an OpenUI specific feature within the Siebel portal framework, which we'll discover in great detail. So in this overview chapter, you have gotten a good overview on the course goals of the Siebel 22 workshop, about the need for monthly updates and the need for an always up-to-date training curriculum, the Siebel Hub is happy to announce the availability of the Siebel 22 workshop, which provides you an always up-to-date learning path to any version beyond IP17. Thanks for watching, take care, and bye-bye.